The prevailing narrative focuses on launch signatures and hypersonic glide vehicles. This is a deliberate distraction. The kinetic cost of a missile exchange is astronomically high, with a mutually assured outcome. It is a bankrupt strategy for a bankrupt state. The real vector of attack is not a warhead. It is a signal loss. It is silence. The trigger is not ideology. It is insolvency. A state offering its citizens $5 a month to quell unrest is not a viable entity. It is a liability awaiting a catalyst. When a nation like Venezuela owes European energy firms $6 billion it cannot repay, it exhausts all conventional leverage. These are mathematical certainties, not political positions. Facing terminal domestic and foreign pressure, the leadership enters a zero-sum protocol. Asymmetric escalation is the final strategic asset. CSIS and RUSI analysis confirms that adversarial doctrine has shifted from kinetic parity to systemic disruption. Why deploy a navy you cannot afford when a single, deniable event can sever the data backbone of global finance? The primary targets are the 1.3 million kilometers of subsea cables that handle 99% of all transcontinental data traffic. This is the silent vector. The objective is not to defeat the global superpower, but to blind it. A coordinated severing of key data arteries, combined with a satellite blinding event, creates a strategic paradox. The blind Leviathan, a system with unparalleled kinetic force, unable to see, unable to transact, unable to distinguish friend from foe. It cannot launch on warning if the warning never arrives. It transforms a national bankruptcy into a cascade failure of the entire system. The motive is not ideology. It is a solvency crisis. When a state's balance sheet collapses, its leadership faces a mathematical certainty, either be consumed by domestic liability or externalize the crisis through kinetic action. The pivot to war is not a function of strength. It is the final, desperate act of an insolvent entity converting national bankruptcy into systemic risk. Consider the analysis of Russia's escalation. CSIS assessments frame the conflict not as a simple land grab, but as a preemptive strike against terminal decline. Faced with crushing internal pressures and an unpopular war that itself becomes a domestic liability, the Kremlin's strategy was forced to mutate. The war became a mechanism to consolidate power and deflect from an economic reality that could no longer be sustained. This is a recurring blueprint. In Venezuela, the state is functionally insolvent, facing a reported $6 billion debt to European energy firms alone. Simultaneously, it faces external military pressure. This combination of foreign liability and domestic fragility creates the exact precondition for a pivot to asymmetry. The state has nothing left to lose and everything to gain by threatening a wider systemic disruption. In Iran, the solvency crisis is even more transparent. Reports of the state offering citizens the equivalent of $5 a month to quell mass social unrest are not policy. They are a signal of absolute financial exhaustion. This is the end stage of a state that has run out of liquidity. Even their own parliament issues warnings against escalation. The math is clear. When you cannot afford to placate your population, your only remaining leverage is to threaten your neighbors. This is the core of asymmetric escalation. Weakness, not strength, is the accelerant. When a regime can no longer pay its bills, fund its military, or control its people, its conventional power approaches zero. Its only remaining asset is its capacity to inflict chaos. The objective is no longer to win, but to make the cost of your collapse unacceptably high for the entire system. It is a launch-on-warning protocol against internal implosion. The kinetic cost-benefit analysis is no longer a debate. It is a mathematical certainty. A Royal United Services Institute (RUSI) report quantifies the new battlefield calculus. A $5 million main battle tank can be neutralized by a $500 first-person view drone. This is a 10,000 to 1 force multiplier, not on the side of industrial superpowers, but on the side of the insolvent. This is the democratization of violence. The financial barrier to entry for projecting lethal force has been effectively zeroed out. For a state facing a terminal solvency crisis, unable to pay back a $6 billion debt to European energy firms, or reduced to offering its citizens $5 a month to quell unrest, this isn't a tactical option. It's the only one. They cannot afford symmetric warfare. Instead, They weaponize their bankruptcy, transforming a negligible capital outlay into a vector for maximum systemic disruption. The lower their liquidity, the higher the incentive for asymmetric escalation. The systemic insolvency protocol is not theoretical. It is being stress-tested in real time. Do not mistake regional instability, warnings about supply chain fragility in South Africa, or liquidity freezes in Canada as the core threat. These are merely proxy laboratories. They are staging grounds designed to measure the kinetic cost of a managed decline before the blueprint is deployed against primary targets. The live fire exercises are in Iran and Venezuela. These are not sovereign nations in the traditional sense. They are strategic liabilities on the global balance sheet. The math is irrefutable. Reports confirm European energy majors are attempting to claw back a $6 billion debt from Venezuela for assets already consumed. This is not a negotiation. It is a declaration of national bankruptcy. When a state's solvency expires, its calculus reverts to a zero-sum game. Internal pressure becomes an accelerant. To counter mounting social unrest, Iranian leadership offered citizens the equivalent of $5 a month. This is not governance. It is a mathematical admission of terminal decay. The point where the state's only remaining leverage is external chaos. This internal collapse is then compressed by external force. Official warnings of potential U.S. military action against Venezuela and Iran serve a specific function. They corner the insolvent actor. Faced with a launch-on warning scenario, the bankrupt state's leadership has no incentive for de-escalation. Their survival protocol demands they trigger a cascade failure they believe they can survive better than their creditors. Therefore, the gray zone is not a place on a map. It is a financial condition. According to analysts at RUSI and CSIS, the playbook is clear. When a state is mathematically eliminated, it will metabolize its own bankruptcy into an asymmetric weapon. It transforms its collapse from a domestic problem into a global kinetic event, holding the entire system hostage. This is not a risk. It is a scheduled demolition. The final protocol is not diplomacy. It is a launch sequence. The launch-on-warning doctrine is a relic of Cold War logic hardwired into nuclear command systems. It is a pre-authorized response protocol that dictates a full-scale retaliatory strike must be launched upon detection of an incoming enemy attack, before that attack makes impact. The logic is zero-sum. Wait for confirmation, and your ability to retaliate is annihilated. You launch on the shadow, not the object. Analysts at CSIS define this as a compressed decision loop designed to bypass human hesitation. The system is engineered for speed, not deliberation. But this creates a systemic vulnerability. The doctrine presumes the integrity of its warning systems, radar, satellite, and intelligence feeds. This is where asymmetric escalation finds its vector. Enter the fog of digital war. A sophisticated cyber attack does not need to launch a missile. It only needs to blind the adversary's early warning system. By spoofing data or initiating a denial-of-service attack, an actor can simulate the signature of a mass launch event. The radar screens go dark. The satellite links sever. To the commander in the bunker, this digital blackout is indistinguishable from a decapitation strike. Faced with total sensory deprivation, the launch-on-warning protocol activates. The commander is forced to make a binary choice with incomplete data. Trust the silence and risk annihilation, or execute the pre-authorized launch and guarantee global kinetic consequences. This is the ultimate leverage for an insolvent state. A nation facing terminal domestic pressure, like Iran offering citizens $5 a month to quell unrest, or Venezuela facing foreign military threats over billions in debt, has a fundamentally different risk appetite. For them, a cyber attack is not a weapon of war. It is a tool of economic negotiation, transforming their national bankruptcy into a global systemic liability. The solvency crisis is the launch trigger. States like Venezuela, facing a $6 billion default to European energy firms, and Iran, reduced to offering citizens $5 a month to prevent collapse, have exhausted conventional options. Their national bankruptcy is now a systemic liability. When subjected to terminal external pressure, such as direct U.S. military threats, these regimes activate an asymmetric protocol. Their only remaining leverage is to demonstrate the ability to inflict a kinetic cost on the global system. This is not an act of war. It is a preemptive bid for leverage before total failure. The next vector is the calibration shot, an event engineered for impossible attribution, designed to test the response threshold of global logistics. CSIS analysts confirm this will not target a warship. It will target a critical node of commerce. Within 12 months, anticipate a multi-day system-wide shutdown of a primary G7 container port, publicly attributed to catastrophic ransomware or unprecedented server failure. The kinetic cost will be billions in stalled trade. It is a mathematical certainty, designed to prove they can trigger a cascade failure without leaving a fingerprint.